Very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, some women found that Jesus' tomb was empty and received the news that he had risen from the dead. Later that same day, just outside the city of Jerusalem, there were two followers of Jesus walking on a road to a town called Emmaus. They were sad and confused about everything that had happened. Suddenly, Jesus showed up next to them, walking alongside them. But for some reason, they didn't recognize him. Jesus asked them what they were talking about, and so they began to tell him about everything that had happened to Jesus. How he had been a powerful prophet who they expected would rescue Israel, but instead, he was executed. So Jesus, still unrecognized, tries to explain to them that this is what the Jewish scriptures had been pointing to all along, that Israel needed a king who would suffer and die as a rebel on behalf of those who actually are rebels, and that through his death and resurrection, he'd be able to give true life to those who would receive it. At this point, it's still not making sense to the disciples. They're as confused as ever, which leads to the scene where they sit down for a meal with Jesus. He takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them just as he did at the Last Supper. This is meant to be an image of his body, a symbol of his death on the cross. And it's then, when they take this broken bread, that their eyes are open to finally see Jesus. Then he disappears, and the scene is over. And then they asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?"
Good morning, everybody. Happy Easter to you all. Happy Easter to everybody in Chatham, in West Side, in Kitchener. My name is Pete. I'm one of the pastors here. If you are visiting with us, or maybe this is your first time, you're like, you know what, I'm not going to go to church until Easter. Well, welcome. Good call. It's a good Sunday to be here. We're going to look at that story that we just talked about in a second. But just to kind of get us all on the same page, Easter is the time when we remember and really elevate this idea, this truth, that Jesus died on Friday, and on Sunday, he rose from the grave, defeating sin and death, and now he is ruling and reigning as the king of the entire universe until he takes all of God's enemies and puts them at God the Father's feet. He is doing all of these things. He has a kingdom that is beginning to grow among us, this good and beautiful kingdom of love and peace, and it's beginning to like bubble up right here, right now among us all. And he is the first fruits. Because he rose from the dead, we can trust and have hope that we too will rise from the dead. And that's why maybe some of you were pretty excited this morning. Maybe some of you at the different campuses, maybe people were like dancing around and people were excited. I wanted to acknowledge, like, it's exciting, but also I want to acknowledge something else. It's a lot. It's a lot. All that stuff I just said, right? Like I just tried to rhyme off a whole bunch of like Bible-y theological ideas just to kind of like pack them all in there and make you go, that is a lot. We believe a lot. And if you're feeling like it's a lot. It's a lot to like wrap our heads around. And maybe with that you go, and is it all true? Is it all true? This is what one of my sons, my middle son Zeke, this is one of his favorite questions to ask, because I'm always trying to trick him. I'm always trying to like do like magic tricks. And then when he goes, "How did you do that?" I go, "It's magic." And I try to get him to believe that it is. And he always presses me. He's like, "Dad, come on. Is it real? Is it real?" No, but is it real? The other day, he asked me, he said, "Can you move the Xbox from the main floor to upstairs?" Because we're going to be having our life group and he wanted to play Xbox upstairs. So I said, sure, we can do that. And then he got distracted and he had to go in the other room for a second. So while he did that, I sneakily went and moved the Xbox from the main floor to the upstairs. And then I went back and I sat right where I was before. And then he came back and goes, "So Dad, can you move the Xbox?" And I go, "I can, but how about we do it with our brains?" And he was like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I want you to think about the Xbox being moved." And then he put his head right on mine and we put our heads together. I'm like, think about it, Zeke, we're moving the Xbox. We're moving it. I can feel it. I think it's moved. And he's like, "Dad, no." I'm like, "I think we did it. I felt it. Didn't you feel it?" And he's like, "No, Dad. Is it real? Is it real?" I don't know. I felt it. You should go check. So he goes, no. He goes and checks. He's like, Dad, it's up there. How did that happen? How did we do? Dad, it's not real. It's not real. And he like wanted me to tell it. He wanted me to break the code. I'm like, and I was like, okay, man, I'll tell you how I did it. When we put our heads together, we magically did it. And he's like, no, Dad, it's not. Maybe some of you are feeling that way. Maybe some of you are feeling, it's a lot. Is it all real, all these things? And if you're feeling that way, I have some great news for you. You are not alone. In the Bible, the accounts of the stories of the resurrection that we have are filled with people wondering, people being afraid at what's happening, and people doubting. People, when they encounter this news that, wait, he's alive? People don't go, oh, of course, and then that means, people go, really? Is it real? What even is real? What even happened? I don't even understand what's happening. So if you feel that way, great news, you are in good company. And what we're going to do this morning is look at one of these many accounts. One of these accounts where people are beginning to encounter this good news and they're starting to waken up to the truth that like, I think it might be real. I think there might be something amazing that is happening. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through Luke's account of the story that you heard told in kind of summary form just a few minutes ago. And we're going to read through the whole story because I want to get to a part at the end that I think changes how we then think through all the different pieces of the story. So here we go. Luke tells us this. I've done something to this. I'm going to reset my clicker because there's many buttons on this and I only use 2. But if I hit any of the other ones, this thing becomes like a bomb. Okay, here we go. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. So we get 2 disciples, and this is on resurrection morning. And we've already heard that Jesus has got up out of the tomb, and then Luke kind of brings us, he's like, now that same day there was another scene happening where there's these 2 disciples, they're going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days? What things? He asked. Clever, Jesus. Jesus comes up on these 2, maybe it's a husband and wife, maybe it's 2 male disciples who we're not really sure. But he comes up on them and is like, why are you guys so sad? What? Oh, things have been happening in Jerusalem? What things? What things? About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the 3rd day since all of this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. So they're walking with Jesus, who they don't know is Jesus. And they're telling Jesus about how other people didn't see Jesus, while they also don't see Jesus. This is a little bit of comedy happening here. He said to them, how foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it's nearly evening and the day is almost over. And so he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. And then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" So at the end of this story, after Jesus appears to them, and then Jesus disappears in the same moment, like he appears and then immediately disappears, they say, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road?" Like this whole time that he was with us, didn't you feel it? Didn't you feel that there was more going on? Didn't you feel it? So Luke tells us this story where at the end we get a bit of information about something that was happening the entire time during the whole story. During the whole story, their hearts had been burning within them. I want to explore a little bit, what does that mean? What does that mean in the context of this story? What were they feeling? Because it's a bit of an artistic, bit of a poetic way of saying it, right? Like, didn't you feel something? Like, we didn't recognize that it was him, but didn't you kind of know like there was a longing happening within us? So I want to talk about three things that I pull from this story. 3 different ways that I think their hearts were burning. The first one is this: burning to not go back. I think their hearts were burning to not go back. These were disciples of Jesus. These were people who had started to follow Jesus. And I like to think that they were on their way to Emmaus because they were on their way back to the village from which they grew up. At some point, they had left Emmaus to follow Jesus. And when they left Emmaus to follow Jesus, they left with hopes and dreams of how amazing things were gonna be. And as they followed Jesus and they heard him tell parables about a loving heavenly Father, as they saw him feed thousands of people, as he saw him welcome the outsiders, as he saw him keep drawing a bigger and bigger circle about who was gonna be invited into what God was doing, their hearts were like lighting up. This is gonna be amazing. This was worth leaving everything for. Leaving our family, leaving our jobs, leaving our village. And yet now on this Easter Sunday morning, they're going back. Reluctantly going back. I mean, just think about some of the most practical things. Like when you left to follow Jesus, you said to your family, "We're going to do something way better than what you guys are doing. This is going to be great." And what did everyone probably say? Well, if they didn't go with you, they probably kind of laughed. You're going to follow that guy? Have you heard his teachings? Have you heard his love your enemy? No, I don't think it's going to be the one. And then you left, and now you're going back, and you're going to have to face those people. You're gonna have to face your brother-in-law. "Oh, how'd the Jesus thing work out? Oh, you're back. Oh, welcome back. Guess what? I took your job. Ha ha ha." Like I imagine they're walking, and it's like the slowest. I don't want to go back. I didn't think I would ever go back there, and now we're going back. There was a famous story that the Jewish people had. We find it in a book called First Maccabees. And in this book, there's a story about the Battle of Emmaus, where God rescued his people in a miraculous battle type scenario. And there's a line there that says like, God will redeem and save his people. So imagine you grew up in Emmaus. All the time, people must have told this story. They'll be like, "This city, we got a story in one of our books, in one of our like important books, about this battle that happened here, and one day God's gonna do it again. God redeemed us at the Exodus, and then he redeemed us at the Battle of Emmaus, and one day he's gonna do it again." And imagine your whole life you grew up with this story, and then you leave to follow Jesus because you think that this story is about to play out again. But then the one that you follow dies. And that hope that like, there's gonna be another battle and God's gonna redeem again. And you're like, I guess we go back to waiting. I spent 20, 30 years in that village waiting for God to show up, and I thought he did. But then he died, so I guess it wasn't time. So now we gotta go back to Emmaus, and we gotta go back to hearing the story. Remember the Battle of Emmaus? God's gonna do it again. You're like, It's exhausting. You don't want to go back there. It's like you ever, if you have a kid, or I mean, we all were kids. You ever get picked up from school? You ever get picked up from school in the middle of the day? You got to go to the dentist or a doctor or something like that. What always do you, like, there's a burning in your heart, and what is it? To not have to go back to school. Like, no matter what time of the day it is, you're like, your parent has in mind, like, I'm gonna take this kid to the thing, and then I gotta go back to work because we're parents, we got things to do. But as a kid, you're like, maybe we're gonna go to McDonald's. Maybe there's gonna be a Happy Meal. Maybe at the end, we just go back home for the day, and this would be great. Because you don't wanna go back. When you go to an amazing vacation experience and you're in this place where you're like, it's just like a fantasy land. What happens in your heart? You're like, I just wish I could stay here forever. I don't want to go back. I think these disciples had a burning in them, a burning to not go back. If only something would happen as we slowly go back to this place that we didn't want to go back to. If only maybe something would interrupt us. And then Jesus comes. It's a simple, little, beautiful part of this story that they are headed in the wrong direction. They're heading away from the action. They're heading away from God and what God's doing in the world. And what does God do? Does God stand far off? He's like, see you later, guys. Sorry, you're leaving Jerusalem? You're going the wrong way. No, he goes and he gets them. And he cuts them off before they can get back. Isn't that beautiful? Like, they have a burning within them, and Jesus comes and he's like, I didn't die so that you would go back. I'm coming to get you. And Jesus walks with them and he stays with them. And eventually, by the end of their time together, what do? They get back in the story. They go back to Jerusalem. They say goodbye to Emmaus once again. I think they had a burning in their hearts to not go back. I think that they had a burning for beauty. A burning for beauty. I think we all have this burning for beauty. We all have this hope that the beautiful things that we experience in life have an even deeper reality to them than just being stories. Or just being things that we see, that there's like something behind the beauty. Many famous theologians have said that beauty is the gateway to God. That our experience of beauty in this life, our experience of love in this life, this is what gets our attention. It gets our attention, it cracks us open, and maybe starts to open our eyes just a little bit to maybe there is an artist behind this beauty. What does it say when Jesus came with them and started to walk with them along the road and they didn't know who he was? What does he start to do with them? He begins to open up the scriptures to them. Luke says it this way. We read this just a second ago. He said to them, how foolish you are and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? He's talking about the Old Testament hope that they had for a king. When you read Messiah, think king. Didn't the king that you were waiting for, didn't the scriptures say that he was gonna have to suffer and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He explained to them how the stories that they grew up hearing as little boys, the stories that they held on to their whole lives, all of these stories in a beautifully woven together way were always pointing to Jesus. They were always pointing to one who would need to suffer, who would need to be the full embodiment of sacrificial love. I wonder if he walked them through stories like you guys remember Noah. Remember Noah and his ark, right? And everybody that got on the ark was saved from the flood, right? I wonder if Jesus was like, the Messiah is the new ark. And everyone who gets into the new Messiah, like everyone who will be in this Messiah, they'll be saved from the coming flood. I wonder if he pointed to, like, you guys know Moses, right? The great prophet Moses. Well, the Messiah was to be a greater Moses who would lead his people out of a different kind of slavery, a spiritual slavery. I wonder if he pointed to, like, the Messiah was going to be this new kind of priest that would be the mediator between us and God the Father. The Messiah was going to be this new one who would be this new temple, this place where heaven and earth would meet and finally be merged together so that they could never be separated. I wonder if he pointed to, how we had a King David, King David, the giant slayer. We had King David, but he wasn't fully the king that we needed. Well, the Messiah was going to be that king who would come and slay the giants of sin and death. I wonder if he pointed them to Leviticus. Hey, you know how the Leviticus it's all centered around this idea of the sacrificial lamb. Well, the Messiah needed to be that sacrificial lamb, the great sacrificial lamb, the once and for all sacrificial lamb. I wonder if he pointed them to Psalm 22 that talks about how there would be one who was like, it was like they were forsaken by God. I wonder if he pointed to that and said, like, that is the Messiah. I wonder if he pointed them to verses like Isaiah, the famous Isaiah passage that talks about one who would be crushed for the sins of the world, and who by his wounds, the world would be healed. That's the Messiah, guys. I wonder if he pointed to all these things and maybe wrapped it all up with the Zechariah passage that we talked about last week on Palm Sunday. Don't you see that your king was always going to be one who would come lowly and humble, riding on a donkey? I wonder if Jesus, as he walked them through the scriptures, he wasn't evoking a burning for this beauty that, like, they were starting to put all the pieces together. And at the very least, they were like, could that be true? What if this is true? What if we've misunderstood where all this was leading the whole time? What if this could be true? I think we all have this longing for beauty within us. Like there's something like written into all of us that we recognize it when we see it. And the pinnacle of this beauty is this idea of sacrificial love that Jesus embodies. That God would become human, take on the sins of the world and die for us. That the king comes and dies for the people. Like that move, that there is beauty within that we all just innately understand. And you know how we can recognize this? Because every great movie embodies this. Every great movie has this sacrificial love feature to it. Think about Armageddon. Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck. What is the tearjerker moment of that movie? When Bruce Willis stays and dies on the asteroid and sends Ben Affleck back so he can go be with Aerosmith's daughter, right? That's that moment. Why does that make us go, like there's a burning for the beauty of that moment? Titanic, Jack and Rose, never let go. The sacrifice of Jack for Rose, even though there was room on that door for him. That sacrifice, it's something that pulls us out. The Dark Knight when Batman, he's the hero we deserve, but not the one that we need. And so he sacrifices his reputation for the city of Gotham. The Hunger Games. When Katniss, the main character, when her little sister gets put up as tribute and she's gonna go to the Hunger Games and die in the Hunger Games, and what does she do? She steps forward, I volunteer as tribute. And she volunteers on behalf of her little sister, saving her little sister's life. Why does that? Why do those moments, something within us like, there's a burning for that. A burning to experience that because it is pointing us to something deeper that is like woven into the fabric of creation, this sacrificial love. Think about like the biggest movie I think of all time, or at least when it came out, it was that Avengers one, Endgame. How does it end? What's the story arc? Tony Stark, Iron Man, goes from a selfish figure who only cares about himself And his last moment is a moment of sacrificial. He dies on behalf of others. I am Iron Man. And it's this world of like superheroes. It's a world that we shouldn't recognize, except for in that moment we recognize something that we all long for. I wish that kind of love was real. A burning for beauty. I think that these disciples, as they walked along this road, had a burning for this beauty. A burning for this love. And as Jesus walked them through the scriptures, he showed them this God of sacrificial love, this God of grace, this God of mercy. He's in every story. He's on every page. And you should have seen that this God had come to you in the person of Jesus, who was the King that you had been waiting for. Lastly, I think that these disciples had a burning within them to see beyond what they could see. To see beyond what they could see. This whole story, the mega theme of the story, this Emmaus Road story, is about coming to see. It's about these disciples who Jesus comes to them and what they don't recognize him. And a very important point, it says they were kept from recognizing him. And most of the interpretations of this favor pretty strongly that it wasn't like they were kept from it because of their doubts or whatever, but that Jesus didn't want them to see him, which is curious to think. So Jesus kept them from seeing him. And then what do they do? They say, the women, they were at the tomb, they didn't see him. And then eventually they see him. Eventually they see him. In what moment do they see him? They see him in this moment where he breaks the bread. It's this communion moment. It's this moment, and it's like just for a moment they see him, and then he disappears. What is going on in this story? Here's what I think is happening. I think Jesus is trying to teach them that there will be other ways to experience his presence and to see him without actually being able to physically see him. He's trying to teach them that this meal that he has given Christians for all time, that we call communion or the Eucharist, that his presence will be there in a unique way. And Christians debate over what that means, but in a unique way, he's going to be there as we celebrate this meal together. Which means there'll be places where you can see him without seeing him. And when they say, like, didn't our hearts burn within us as we walked with him and as we talked with him? If Luke isn't trying to point us to, like, there's other ways of experiencing his presence too, like just walking with him, being aware of his presence, talking to him. Didn't our hearts burn as he opened the scriptures to us? Jesus will be available to us, present to us as we open the scriptures. I think Jesus is trying to teach these disciples how to see him without actually seeing him. Now, why would that be important? Well, have any of you seen Jesus? Because I haven't. I've never seen him like with these eyeballs, but I have seen him with the heart that God gave me that burns for him. And I wonder if Luke didn't tell us this story so that Christians for all time wouldn't be able to look back on it and go, oh, this is a story for all of us. This isn't a story about the Thomas who got to touch his wounds and all of us are like, I want to be Thomas. I want to touch his wounds. That way I know for sure. Luke's like, you guys need another story because the mass experience will not be that you get to touch him. It will be that you get to experience a burning heart and an ability to see beyond what you can see with your physical eyes. I think that that's the burning. They have this burning to it seems like as we walked with him along the road, like we were trying to see something and he was trying to open our eyes. And then at the very end, like when they finally see Jesus and realize it was him, Jesus doesn't stick around and go, way to go guys, you solved the mystery. He instantly goes away. Because the point is, I need to teach you how to walk with me without physically seeing me. I need to teach you how to walk by faith. And then what do right after this story? They immediately go back to the other disciples and they tell them the same story. Jesus was present to us when we walked with him along the road, when we opened the scriptures, and when we took the meal that he gave us. Didn't our hearts burn within us? Didn't our hearts hope that there was more going on? Didn't our hearts hope that God would come and intervene and do something in this story? Didn't our hearts burn for beauty? Do you know this burning? Do you know this feeling of wanting there to be more? This feeling of like, it feels like God is doing something in my heart. It's an important feeling. It's an important sense to cultivate, because we're not gonna get to touch Jesus, but we can still see him and experience his presence. And so this morning, what I wanted us to do is pay attention to this feeling, this burning heart idea. And so we're gonna create a moment for us to do this together. And so I want to invite Cindy to come out, and Cindy's going to begin to play on the keys. And we're just going to sing through a chorus a few times. And I'll say some things in between the chorus, but Cindy, when you're ready, could you sing for us this chorus just twice through? It's simple words. It's my heart burns for you. It sounds like this.
My heart burns for you. And my heart burns for you.
So if you're comfortable, I invite you, you can close your eyes or you can keep them open. We're just gonna spend a few minutes. I want you to pay attention. Is your heart burning? Does your heart burn because you don't wanna go back? There's a great line that the messengers say when the women find the empty tomb. And it happens right in the same chapter of Luke that we've been reading this morning. They say, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Isn't that like a metaphor for our lives? Why do you keep going back to things that are hurting you? Why are you looking for life? Why are you looking for satisfaction? Why are you looking for peace and joy in places that have never given you that before? Why are you looking for life among dead things? Do you know what it feels like to I don't want to go back. I feel a burning, a calling into something new, and I don't want to get sucked back into these other things. I don't want to get sucked back into the same old thought patterns, the same old conflicts, the same websites, the same screens, the same rhythms of my life, the same chasing after money and praise from other people. I don't want to go back to any of that. I have a glimpse of something new that you are doing in the world, Jesus, and I want to be a part of that. And so this morning, to begin, let's just begin by singing that our hearts burn, that Jesus, you would come and rescue us. You would come and get us. You'd come bring us back into your story.
And my heart burns for you. And my heart burns for you.
that idea of our hearts burning for beauty, that there would be a God of sacrificial love who would send his son to die for us when we're completely undeserving, that he would take our sins upon himself. Oh, that that would be true. And more than just be true, that we could know that truth, that we could experience the presence of that God and his love. If your heart burns to know that beauty, if you're feeling that, then sing with us that your heart burns. Our heart burns to know your beauty, to know your love, God.
Let's sing together. And my heart burns for you. And my heart burns for you. And my heart burns for you, God. And my heart burns for you.
There's a crucial part of this story as they were walking along with Jesus and they get to where they had been going. And it says that Jesus pretended or feigned like or was actually going to continue on, except that they strongly urged him to stay. They strongly urged him to stay. Why? Because their hearts were burning. If you would have asked them, why do you want this guy to stay? They'd be like, I don't know. Something mystical, mysterious is happening within me, and I don't want it to end. So stay with me. And if they don't invite him to stay in that moment, the story seems pretty clear that Jesus would have been happy to continue on, as he had many appointments to keep on Resurrection Sunday. But they invite him, stay. And maybe that's what some of us need to do this morning, is to invite him to stay. Because he's speaking to you right now. You can't see him, but you can see him. You can't feel him, but you can feel him. Your heart is burning for him, for this to be real, for his love to be real. And so maybe for some of you, it's just gonna be a simple moment as we sing this one last time that you invite Jesus, would you just stay? I don't know what all this means. I couldn't write a theological paper about what it means to follow you, but I know that this moment is one that I want to stay in. Maybe some of you feel like you went back to Emmaus and he's calling you, get back into the story, back into Jerusalem. You're like, Jesus, stay with me, keep calling me, keep bringing me back and participating in this story with you. But maybe for somebody here, for somebody in Chatham, for somebody in Kitchener, for somebody in Westside, you're feeling Jesus inviting you into something even deeper, a full surrender of your life to him. And that's what this moment is for you. To say, I trust that you are the good King who came and gave his life for many. And I want to be included in the many. And so I surrender to you and I invite you into my life. Teach me how to follow you. And that can sound as simple as this prayer that I get from these words of these disciples. Would you just stay with me? Teach me how to be like you. I give you my life. Would you make that your prayer as we sing this chorus one last time?
And my
stand with me? I'm going to pray, and we're going to sing one last song. Jesus, thank you. Thank you that you are here. By your Spirit, you are here. You are lighting up our hearts, and we can feel your presence with us. May we be known as people whose hearts are on fire, who see beyond what others can see, who have this deep sense of your beauty that you've hidden in all creation, a deep sense of the reality of your sacrificial love. And may we call other people to experience that. May our burning hearts light other hearts on fire, Jesus. We pray these things in your wonderful resurrected name. Amen.